and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How you doing?
I am all right, thanks very much.
Can we get a wallet update?
Well, I took the executive decision to cancel all the cards last week and to order new ones. So the wallet is gone. I mean, the tile is still pinging me notifications every so often. I swear to God, it's been around Dublin City. I'm guessing it's just, it's been all over city centre, out in the west of Dublin. It's everywhere. But it's not near me, or I can't find a way to get at it, and that's it. It's gone now. It's just going to travel around Dublin in the back of this taxi forever, because I assume that's where it still is. Must be in the back of the cab, because it's not moving itself, is it? You know.
Well, I guess we have to try and be happy for the tile. It's seeing the world, you know.
This is it. Getting its travel juices on, I think. So
it's made a break for independence.
Yes. So look, hopefully new cards will arrive this week, and I can, do the stuff I need to do with the cards for the business and everything else. But it's gone.
Are you going to disconnect from the tile? Do you know what I mean? Do you think you'll be able to take that step?
Oh yeah.
Or are you going to keep getting updates on this tile for the rest of your life?
I think I'll just keep getting updates just to see where it ends up eventually, you know?
Yeah, it's in Hawaii.
Wow. Who knew that taxis could get to Hawaii from Dublin?
It's great. I mean, in a way, you're the one stalking this taxi driver now.
Yeah, that's true. One day, maybe I'll just get into that cab again and it'll go,
Can you imagine?
There it'll be.
Beautiful moment.
I know, yeah. Reunited with my now completely useless fucking wallet.
Yeah.
How's everything your end?
All good. Yeah, all fine. Thanks, man. Nothing major to report.
That's good.
No, it's Christmas, isn't it? Sort of hurtling towards Christmas now.
Yes, it's getting very close. And there's a lot of football to play between now and then, though. And a good bit of football over the festive period. And
is that a good thing or a bad thing, Andrew?
I guess your mileage may vary on that this particular morning, where yesterday was quite a frustrating day for Arsenal, was it not?
I think so, yeah. I mean, overall, people are looking at this as a good weekend for Liverpool, aren't they? Who managed to somehow sort of improve their position without actually playing. Ingenious.
Yes. Yeah, everything is going their way this season.
Exactly, right? They get some rest. City drop points. Arsenal drop points. Chelsea, of course, closed the gap a little bit.
That was very funny.
In spectacular fashion.
In as much as I hate, obviously, to see Chelsea happy, that was exceptionally funny. Maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it deserves a little attention.
All right.
But yes, disappointing weekend from an Arsenal perspective, for sure.
I mean, in isolation, I think you can say, pretty reasonably that a draw away from home against a good team who've been playing very well this season isn't necessarily the worst result in the world. But I think in the context of this particular title race, this felt like a game from which Arsenal badly needed 3 points. That gap to Liverpool, as we know, is there. So you can look at the game in isolation if you want, but I think we do have to look at it in the context of this season. I suppose the thing, or where we should start maybe, is the lineup. And I know there've been quite a lot of questions about the lineup. And Thomas Partey being moved to right back, Jurriën Timber being moved to left back is understandable, I think, because obviously we don't have Ben White, we don't have Takahiro Tomiyasu, we don't have Gabriel, we don't have Ricardo Calafiori, and we don't have Alexander Zinchenko, whose 60 minutes of football the other day is obviously too much for an author's body to contend with. So he had to sit this one out.
He's making an appearance at a book festival, actually, and it clashed with the game.
I mean, he's the first player in Premier League history to miss a game with writer's cramp. But
I also have to say, just quickly,
yeah,
our recruitment at left back, the fact that we replaced the incredibly injury-prone Kieran Tierney with Alexander Zinchenko, and then appeared to replace the incredibly injury-prone Alexander Zinchenko with Ricardo Calafiori, that is quite spectacular, I would say.
It's something, all right, isn't it?
It is definitely something. But yeah, so with those absences, I could understand the selection.
The hindsight being 2020, obviously. Is there anything else he could have done? When it came to selecting the team yesterday, I saw people.
So one thing he could have done, he could have not played Jorginho potentially and put Mikel Merino into midfield. That was one thing I was thinking. Yeah.
But I meant more in terms of the left back position. I saw people saying, well, could we have played Miles Lewis-Skelly there, kept Timber at right back? Because I do think
he is alive, of course.
He is alive, but he hasn't played a game of competitive football in 6 months. So I think what informed the team selection, was the absences, the injuries, right? Which, as I said, makes sense. But also the potential threat of somebody like Adama Traore on the right-hand side. I know that's not necessarily how they lined up in the end, but, you were worried. I was certainly, we were having the discussion on the preview pod, whether it's Zinchenko or Calafiori at left back. That's going to be a tough gig if Adama Traore is running at you down that right-hand side. So Kieran Tierney, having not played, I think he's really only on the bench because of all those players being absent. And Lewis-Skelly, who's been injured a bit of late, so I don't really know, how fit he is to do 90 minutes away from home against, a Fulham team who are decent and who are having a good season. So I can see why he decided to go with Partey at right back and Timber at left back. I was maybe a little surprised that he didn't try the Rice, Merino, Odegaard midfield.
Yeah. Listen, Jorginho had a very good game at West Ham, wasn't it? And I suppose he was thinking this is a game where we might have a lot of the ball and, he'll help us kind of be efficient with that. But yeah, certainly I think that was a possibility that he could have dropped Rice in at number 6 and put Merino in ahead. How much difference that would have made, it's really hard to know, isn't it? But I do feel like the situation at fullback did impede us a bit. Timber's combination play on the right-hand side has been really good. Up there, I would say, with Ben White, certainly close to it in terms of bringing the best out of Odegaard and Saka. I felt like we missed him in that respect. And I think even at left back, it's funny because when he arrived, a lot of his early football was played at left back and he's largely done very well there. But I did think, I found myself sort of wishing he was playing right back in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you because I think Partey was fine at right back and defensively, there wasn't a lot for our back four to do yesterday. 1 or 2 moments aside.
Yeah.
But it is about those combinations. It is about that chemistry on the right-hand side, particularly with Odegaard and Saka, and against a team like Fulham, or who played the game like Fulham did yesterday, where they sat in a low block and they stayed extremely compact, particularly in the first half. I thought they were very disciplined, very organised, made it very difficult for us to make chances. But it felt like we were missing a little bit of the puzzle on that right-hand side. When Odegaard and Saka combine and you don't have the right back involved as well, it becomes a little more difficult to make those sort of give and goes that can open up a defence or can allow you to get in behind a defence. If it's 2 players playing off each other, you're missing a point of that triangle.
Yeah, and those runs are vital in terms of taking markers away and even just creating a yard's worth of space. So I do think that was a blow. I should also say, Andrew, this game was cursed from the off because we were subjected to Chris Sutton on co-commentary for Sky. We should have known. We all should have collectively turned our televisions off at that stage and known this was not our day. The TV producer gods were not looking favourably on us. No,
that is true. That is true. But it was a bright start. I suppose the underlying thing to all the frustration that exists about this game goes beyond the result, and it's more about the performance in that we had a lot of the ball and dominated territory and dominated possession, but didn't really do enough with it. Sucker punched a little bit early on with the goal, a classic against the run of play kind of goal. How did you view this one? People are looking at Kivior. There's maybe a question about Saliba as he comes across. I think it's a great finish, actually. It really is a hell of a hit from Raul Jimenez. But also it's one of those where you kind of look at the goalkeeper, even though it's not necessarily his fault. So how did you view the goal?
The finish is great. I think it's one of those where Saliba and Raya almost show him that corner and say, go on then. And I don't really think they expect him to make the shot.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult finish and he pulls it off. I do have a look at Kivior on it. Like there's a particular replay of it where you just see Raul Jimenez. I think he almost feints to sort of come back and collect the ball and then runs in behind. It's a classic centre-forward move. And Kivior, I think, gets quite easily done by that. So I don't think he'll be too pleased. Maybe Saliba could have done more, but I think he seemed to be wary that the striker's going to chop back inside, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking there. That if he commits at full pelt and Jimenez comes back inside on his left foot, he's sending him to the cleaners there. So I think that's what it was, and it was about, okay, you've got a small angle with which you can take this shot and find the back of the net because Raya's there. But it is a great finish. And yeah,
a bit of a sucker punch. I mean, basically what happened was Timber, I think, followed Iwobi into midfield from left back, and it left some space to challenge for a goal kick or a long ball, and it just left some space in that channel. And
do you know what? I noticed that before, like just a couple of seconds before, actually.
Right.
Just before the goal, Timber had gone high up the pitch, and if you watch, Trossard notices and drops back into the left-back position.
Interesting.
Whereas this time, that didn't happen, and there was that space then for Raul Jimenez to run in behind and get beyond Kivior. So there's a slight warning in the build-up to that.
The thing is, our left-backs have always done that. And that's why I always say, whenever we look at left-backs, we go, are they defensively suspect? Like we had a conversation about Calafiori last week. I always think it's partly about the formation and the way the position plays. Like we're always asking them to follow people into midfield. Gabriel is outstanding at covering that channel. I think he's so good. Like he plays as a centre half, but he almost plays as a left back at times. Like the way he sweeps out towards that flank and clears things up. And I was a little bit reminded of, was it Liverpool's second goal in the game at Anfield, which, where Miles Lewis-Skelly was out the pitch, and again it was knocked into that channel and Kivior didn't quite deal with it. Obviously you just don't know. Maybe Gabriel would have the same issues, but if I had to bet on one of them to deal with that situation, it probably, definitely would be Gabriel.
Yeah, for sure. But that's the 11th minute. Not ideal, obviously, to concede a goal, but you've loads of time to put things right.
Yeah. Recoverable, for sure.
For sure. And it is only 1-0. And I think Arsenal did play well enough in the first half in terms of, where we played. Certainly we played high up the pitch, but without really causing Leno too many problems. I'm just sort of thinking there was a Rice shot, wasn't there, that he dragged wide with his left foot. Might have been
that was after a really nice pass from Trossard.
Yeah.
From a similar area to the one that released Havertz, actually, at West Ham. I mean, set pieces were a threat, Andrew. It won't surprise anyone to hear. There were a few that Leno punched away, and I think Saka had one that was, came in right close to the near post that was quite dangerous. Saka had a moment where...
The back post?
Exactly that. He had a shot saved at Leno's near post as well. There was a sort of that Declan Rice moment towards the end of the first half where he slid in but didn't quite get there.
I mean, it is a game of inches or millimeters or whatever you want to call it, where Like, that's such a good ball from Saka, and Rice is really desperately trying to get there on the stretch. It's only literally inches away from his toe. I think if he just touches that, it's going to be a goal, and that is kind of the story of this game. You've got to analyze why those moments or other moments didn't materialize. But, when you take into account the goal we scored, the goal that was disallowed, the moments where perhaps we could have been a little more on our toes, there were a couple of those. But, first half, we finish it with one shot on target despite that domination.
Yeah. And had Will Smith-Rowe had a better first touch, Fulham might have had another very good chance in that half.
Yeah. He had a quiet game, didn't he, Smith-Rowe?
He did. Listen, he's still an Arsenal man, Andrew. He was never going to hurt us on the day. He can't do that to us. But, yeah, I feel really conflicted about this game. Because as you said, like in isolation, it's not a disaster. And I don't think the performance was particularly problematic or bad. I do feel that, the margins really went in Fulham's favour. But the issue is, in the context of our season and with the league table looking as it does, it's very damaging. Yeah. So, inevitably there's going to be a kind of inquest about it. But I think if this game... I mean, it's such a hypothetical, but I think if we play that game 10 times, we win it 8 of them.
Sure. Sure. I know what you mean. But, the problem is, of course, that we couldn't get the goals that we needed. And games are always going to be tight in the Premier League, and margins can be tight, and sometimes you're on the right side of them, sometimes you're on the wrong side of them. But I think they're sort of body of evidence starts to build over time about your ability to push yourself onto the right side of those margins, if that's the right way of putting it.
That's absolutely fair.
Yeah.
Like, again, speaking about things being in isolation, is this result, is this performance a freak, or is it, a complete outlier, or is it maybe indicative that this season we don't quite seem to make the margins work in our favour enough?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a discussion point for sure. I guess at halftime there would have been a discussion about trying to score early in the second half. Put some pressure back on Fulham, get yourselves back into the game. And, as it transpired, that's what happened. 7 minutes in, we get a corner.
I think the corner came from a very good Declan Rice delivery from the right-hand side. Well, certainly it was like a minute or so prior. He whipped one in, and I thought, wow, that was a hell of a ball. And then he produces another one for the...
I think it was a Saka cross, actually, after the Rice ball had gone in. I know the one you're talking about, but I think it was a Saka cross that they headed behind. But it was a good delivery from Rice, good jump, good leap from Kai Havertz to head it down. I mean, Chris Sutton going on and on about how Havertz should be scoring from there, maybe, but, he headed it down. William Saliba's there, knocked it in the back of the net. My initial thought when they showed the replays was, he's going to be offside here.
Yeah.
But Anthony Robinson is standing just in the right place from an Arsenal perspective, and it's Saliba's second goal in 2 games, and that's sort of almost exactly what you would want. If you're writing the script for the second half, it would be score early, then really apply the pressure on Fulham and turn the screw. But this is where I think the game gets kind of frustrating, in that despite lots of possession, despite playing the game primarily in their half, chances and chance creation were not at a premium, I think it's fair to say.
No, I think that is fair. And I think actually, sort of curiously enough, when it went to 1-1, I think Fulham's mission became pretty clear. Like, I don't think this is a game that they felt like they were going to score again in. I think it would have been... their first goal was already against the run of play. I think the second goal would have been even more so. I felt like they sort of really at that point sat in and were like, right, we know exactly what we need to do, and we're going to make it very difficult for you. And yeah, I'm not sure we did enough, really. There weren't a flurry of chances. There's one chance really in the second half that I look back on with regret.
The Partey header?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a great chance.
Yeah, he's got to hit the target there, Not he should score or he must score, but he must hit the target,
Yeah. I mean, headed chances, the analytics guys will tell you they're not as easy as they look at times, and statistically they don't come off as frequently as you might imagine. But that's about as free and unmarked as you can be on a corner kick. In a crowded penalty area, to find that much space and the ball to land pretty much flush on your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
he should do better. Should do better.
I mean, I'm not sure he's a player who... I don't think his heading ability is one of the strengths we would highlight in his game necessarily, but it's a great opportunity.
Yes, it is. And again, that was from a set piece, wasn't it? It was a corner. Declan Rice took the corner. So,
What are you making of that, Andrew? Because obviously we didn't speak after the Man United game, but what are you making of the degree to which it's sort of become a focus, not just in terms of how we play, but also the narrative around it is so huge at this point in time. And do you think there's any sort of possibility of that almost sort of subconsciously seeping into players' minds? I mean, do you think that there's too much emphasis on it?
Too much? No, I don't think so. Does it become a crutch?
Ruben Amorim said something really interesting after. I don't know if you saw his press conference after the United game, but, and I don't think it was meant as a dig, but he basically said when Saka and Martinelli get to the byline, they try and get a cross in because they know that gives them a great chance of scoring, but equally they know if they win a corner, they've got a great chance of scoring too.
Yeah.
And I think some people interpreted that as him saying they play for corners, and Mikel Arteta bit back a bit in his own press conference. But I do think that's interesting. Does it get to the point where instead of recycling or looking back to the guy on the edge of the box, you just think, well, we'll just take the corner? Yeah,
maybe so. I actually had a bit of a discussion about that in terms of Martinelli on the Arsecast on Friday with Kaya, right, where it just occurred to me a couple of times in the United game that maybe Martinelli, perhaps even subconsciously, looks for the corner or sees the corner as the easy option rather than trying to do something else. But yesterday there were moments, I think, where he could have gone on the outside of Tete, right back, and didn't really try and win corners. He did try and get the ball into the box and almost helped us win the game. But I had a look at this.
We actually only had 6 corners yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a stat from Orbinho the other day. Goals from open play in 2024 in the Premier League. Manchester City have scored 58 in 2024. Arsenal have scored 57. Chelsea 56, Liverpool 56. Probably skewed a little bit now by Chelsea's demolition yesterday of Tottenham, right? Yeah. But, the idea that we can only score from set pieces is completely wrong. It is wrong. Look at what we did against West Ham. Look at what we did against Sporting. There are set piece goals in there, but there are other goals too, so it's not just the case. But I do understand the question and whether you can find the right balance between, being reliant on corners or set pieces or just being very good at them and that being an additional string to your bow. You know what I mean? I think the focus on it was heightened after what we did against Manchester United. United led in a corner in a couple of minutes in their game at the weekend as well. You'll remember against Nottingham Forest. Mm-hmm. So maybe the conversation should be about Manchester United not being able to defend set pieces rather than Arsenal being reliant on set pieces. But
I thought the same, by the way, when I watched the Forest game. Yeah. I was like, I think, we are good, but they're also very bad at them.
Yes. So look, I don't worry. I think, if we're good at set pieces, brilliant. It's a good thing from my perspective. I think the question about what we can do from open play is the more pertinent one on the basis of what we saw from the team yesterday, right? Because I think Odegaard felt quiet to me. I'm not sure he was quite the same after picking up that little knock in the first half.
Painful.
He didn't look as free with his movement and wasn't able to get into those little pockets and spaces and drift around. Like typically in a game like that, you'll see Martin Odegaard drop deep and pick up the ball off the defenders a little bit and try and open up space elsewhere. And he just seemed a little confined to his one area of the pitch. Havertz had a quiet game. Trossard, quiet enough game. Martinelli came on, was all right, nothing special. Gabriel Jesus, I mean, I think this was like a really disappointing performance from Gabriel Jesus as a sub. It stood out to me, because of how bad it was. Because I want to see a guy, who hasn't scored in 20 Premier League games, 21 Premier League games, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I want to see a guy who's desperate to put that right and to break that drought and to get a goal or to make an assist or something. And he was really awful. Like, I think that moment when Rice played him through, he kind of bottled out of that challenge with Leno, and I think he could have gone for the ball. I know it might hurt if the goalkeeper whacks into you, but you're a centre forward or you're playing as a forward. That's the job. He made one pass in 20 odd minutes on the pitch, completed one pass of just 6 attempted, 8 touches of the ball. And I think this is where we have to have that discussion about what we can do from open play, because there are going to be games where your starting 11 doesn't quite deliver what you want. So you look to your bench. You look to your bench to change things, to provide more attacking threat, to offer the solution to the problem that you've got within the game. And I think what we got yesterday was just another problem on top of that. The Jesus cameo was just awful. Martinelli, we can talk about it in a bit in the context of the disallowed goal. I worry that the options that we have available to us when our, in inverted commas, best 11 or maybe best 12, because I think there's a sort of interchangeability between Martinelli and Trossard.
Yeah.
After that, we're really, really struggling, and Jesus just looks like a shadow of himself, and that's maybe being kind. I was disappointed by the lack of effort and application from him yesterday. And then the other option that we have is Raheem Sterling, and not for the first time this season, James. We've been itching for a goal in the final stages of a game, and he hasn't even got off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, that is really striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how many times have we said that this season? Probably 3 or 4 times already. That seemingly you'd think this was exactly the scenario he would have been bought for, and yet he's not used. The Jesus one, I sort of don't really know what to say. I mean, I actually am not as hard on him for that incident with the Rice ball over the top, just because I think something happens with that pass where it kind of drops out the sky, and I don't think anybody quite anticipates that. So I'm not going to kill him for that. But it was a very underwhelming cameo, and the latest in quite a long line of them.
Yeah.
And just my emotions as a supporter when we're looking for a goal, and it's like, right, who's the striker on the bench we can turn to? And it's a guy who's barely scored this year. It just doesn't fill you with a great deal of confidence.
No.
And I guess what we're watching is a player who is probably incredibly short on confidence and self-belief. Mm-hmm. But I take your point. In that situation, you want to see someone at least giving everything, and he doesn't seem to transmit that right now. It's just so far, so dramatically removed from the player we watched in those first 6 months.
Yeah.
But I'm almost tired of saying that now. Like, I almost feel like we're at the point where that's the outlier. That's the anomalous period in his time.
Yes, no, I think that's right. I think that's right. I do genuinely think that is a bit more representative of him as a player, right? that's the player we bought. The player we have now is one who's been, I think, massively damaged by that knee injury. There's no question in my mind that what we bought is very different from what we've got since he's returned from that knee injury, right? And look at his track record at Man City. I know, he was playing in a brilliant team, but he scored a lot of goals for Manchester City and made a lot of assists for Manchester City, and, was a key player, not always a starter, but certainly a key player, playing 40, 50 games every season in a team that won a lot of titles. And I know it's Man City, but, standards are high there. I think what we've got now is a guy who's been impacted so badly by that injury. I don't think he knows what to do anymore, almost, and I don't mean to make excuses for him, because there's this whole thing. Well, if he's not playing very often, how can you expect him to deliver? But it's that vicious circle, catch-22. Unless you deliver, you're not going to play. It's one goal, James, in his last 31 appearances for Arsenal, and that was in the EFL Cup. Yeah,
I mean, he's been dramatically outscored by his compatriot Gabriel, who's playing at centre-back. It is not good. He does sort of remind me, some people will say this is a bit of a low blow, but it slightly has the feel of kind of latter-day Lacazette, like where I'm not even sure he's getting in the positions anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't really, he just feels like a guy who's really lost his way. And I actually think, at this point in time, he needs to leave for his own career. Like, I think he needs, it seems to me, a fresh start.
Agree. Completely.
And maybe he recognises that himself, to be honest. Watching his performances this season, it feels like maybe he does recognise that.
Go do a Lacazette, where Lacazette went back to Lyon and scored a load of goals. Like, sometimes, it goes stale, and sometimes you need a change of scenery to rekindle your career. And I think Arsenal are going to have to be like Mikel Arteta can be ruthless when he wants to be ruthless. I think this is one of those situations. There might be a couple of players actually who could do with a touch of ruthlessness about them, or ruthlessness applied to them and their situations. But, like I said, one goal in 31. And if he came on and he's really, really trying and it doesn't work, you can feel a lot more sympathy for a guy who just, for whatever reason, seems to be going through the motions. And I get it, if you're low on confidence, you don't feel good, you still have a job to do, you're still being paid a lot of money. And I don't think what he gave us yesterday was acceptable, even taking into account all the difficulties that he might be having.
I mean, saying everything we're saying, I don't think it will be straightforward to find a buyer for Gabriel Jesus, because if we can see it, then you think professional analysts and scouts are seeing it as well.
Nobody's going to buy him.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe this is, we've got a guy in Jason Ato, who's currently the interim sporting director, who's probably thinking, what can I do in the next 6 months to demonstrate my value to the business, and that, I'm the right man for this position? If he finds a solution there, he'll have done himself a big favour, I suspect.
Yeah. So that aside, the frustration obviously is compounded by the disallowed goal, because there's a moment or a couple of moments or even a few minutes where you think, yes, we've won it, we've pulled it out of the bag, and then VAR obviously checked and it's offside. I did want to ask you, because I had a question on this and I just sort of want to put it to you, from the Discord from Raya Deep Mountain Kai. He said, how do you feel about the criticism Martinelli received on the Sky commentary for the offside? The commentator said there was no reason for him to be offside as he was looking along the line. I think Paul Merson said it was criminal to be offside in that scenario. The question goes on, given VAR had to look at stills from two angles and put lines on the screen to confirm a very marginal offside, is it reasonable to expect a player to judge his run that accurately in real time?
I certainly don't think it was criminal. That's where I'm at with it. I feel like effectively he's probably a fraction of a second out, and I can't be too critical of that. You know, what are we saying? Would William Saliba have been criticised had he been an inch further forward when he scored his goal? You know?
Yeah.
I think these calls are sort of so absurdly tight. And I have always said, like, that is not why the law was created. You know, I understand there has to be an arbitrary definition so that we can flag something offside or not. But the spirit of the law is to basically not stand a few yards in front of your opponent. And at the speed the game's being played, I just can't come down too hard on Martinelli for that. What do you think, though?
I don't think he should be offside. I can see it, you know, it is a half a second or a fraction of a second and half a step, if even that he's offside. So it is so tight. But I think when we talk about fine margins and things you can control, that I think might be one of them. You know, just
possibly.
You know, I mean, I don't think he deserves completely being pilloried for it, because the frustration isn't so much about Martinelli. It goes back to these discussions. Remember, we used to have like discussions about how a miss or a missed opportunity felt really seismic when we weren't making enough opportunities. Yeah. Remember those conversations when the team wasn't really creating? So I think the criticism of Martinelli is probably exacerbated by the fact that this was maybe the best opportunity that we made in that second half. It is a lovely ball in, by the way. It's a great cross to the back post. It's a great run from Saka, heads it home, and it's offside by a little bit. I think he can control. I think he can hold his run or hold the line a little bit better. But at the same time, it is one of those really fine margin things. It could be a moot point had we done more with the possession and domination of territory that we had. It just feels more acute because that was the only real breakthrough that we were able to make.
Yeah, and it's a cruel goal to take away because it felt big, that moment when Saka stoops to nod the ball in. It felt significant too because I've been saying last few weeks there are goals for Saka in that position. Like, yeah, you know, that's something I want to see him do more of. Arriving at the back post, scoring the odd-headed goal. I think there's easily 5 goals a season there that he's not scoring currently that he can easily.
Yeah.
And, you know, Saka's been sensational this season, and him being the man who, I think he was wearing the captain's armband at the time as well, nods home the winner, closes the gap to 4 points. It felt big, and then it's whipped away from you. And it's a horrible feeling and a blow. But maybe, you know, we speak about, you know, focus on moments when you haven't done enough across the overall 90 minutes, and maybe that's true here as well.
Yeah, no, I think it is because, you know, when you look at how much possession we had and when you look at how much territory we had, we didn't really create the kind of chances that you would expect. The sort of craft, the ability to open Fulham up. Maybe too, you know, as much as we don't like to do it, you've got to give some credit to the opposition for defending really well. They stayed compact throughout. They did win their challenges or make it very difficult. You know, Saka had a little bit of success against Anthony Robinson, who otherwise I think had a decent game against Saka.
I thought he did well, yeah. And he has done. I think he has done before. So yeah, I thought they defended very stoutly, but you know, there was one moment I can think of. Odegaard played a really nice pass into Havertz, and he dragged his shot wide at the near post. But that was quite a rare incident of us sort of being able to play through them, you know, within the width of the penalty area. Yeah. There was not a great deal of that at all. And once that goal was disallowed, I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like that was sort of the wind out of the sails. I didn't really fancy us to nick it after that point.
No, I mean, there were a couple of dead ball situations that I don't think we made the most of.
Yeah, a couple of the late deliveries weren't great.
Declan Rice, there was a free kick out on the left-hand side, and he just sort of curled it over the top corner. You know, those are... Think back to, for example, you know, Luton away last season, where a good delivery into the box gives you the opportunity to score that last-minute winner. You know, and again, I don't want to put it down as you know, this is like a big problem for Declan Rice, because generally speaking, the quality of his deliveries is exceptional.
And we score from one.
Yeah, exactly. But I think in those moments, those late moments of a game where you haven't really played as well as you can, you've got to make sure that you give yourself the best possible chance to maximize those scenarios. And if you whack a ball over the bar, I know there's a fine line, isn't there? Because if you want to get the ball into the box with the kind of pace and whip, you know, that kind of Beckham-esque low trajectory, which he was so good at, you know, the consistency of his delivery was incredible. And that's what made United so dangerous. You know, when he had those corner kicks and free kicks that he would put in, it was the trajectory and the speed of those balls that came in that made them as dangerous. So I understand, you know, Rice does need to put something on the ball, and there is, you know, the possibility that just getting it a little bit wrong means you overhit it. But I think it was disappointing, you know, a couple of those.
And those are the moments that you train for and practice for.
Yeah.
You know, when it's the 88th minute, the 93rd minute, whatever it might be, when you need something, when the pressure is really on. Psychologically, there's a lot going on at that moment. And I think actually being able to deliver and replicate your technique and repeat under that degree of pressure is sort of the ultimate aspiration, right? And on the day, we didn't quite achieve that. So yeah, it was frustrating. It was frustrating, and I really think that you know, the big picture was that we had that chance to close the gap to 4 points, and I know Liverpool would have had a game in hand, but I think even just the look of the Premier League table, I think it would have been such a psychological boost to us and potentially put them under a bit of pressure, and we didn't do it.
No, we didn't do it.
You and I both predicted a draw, by the way.
Did we?
Well, so far we're 100%. We said we'd beat Forest, West Ham and Man U. We both went for the draw at Fulham.
Oh, there you go. So it's our fault. Sorry, guys. Can I ask?
We knew too much.
Can I ask you something? I thought there was a really interesting comment from Arteta in his press conference, because he talked, you know, about the fine margins and that we deserve to win. And, you know, I think there probably was, over the course of 90 minutes, enough in the Arsenal performance to merit a win. But, you know, you've got to put the ball in the back of the net. You've got to take your chances. So then he sort of, you know, says we can't feel sorry for ourselves. We have to stand up for ourselves. You know, no need to cry. He said, normally you don't see these kinds of games here at Craven Cottage. We have to continue to improve and look at what we can do better so the opposition have zero chances to win the game. That's the objective. And I found that absolutely fascinating, because I think it's very, very Arteta. Like, I don't think just because he says one thing doesn't mean he's not considering other things, right? We're sitting here this morning having this discussion about needing to turn that domination into more chances and more goals, right? We have to score more goals. And Arteta could have come out and said, you know, what we have to do is focus on, you know, being a bit more clinical in both boxes, as, you know, something is often said. We need to focus on scoring goals, or we need to get the ball in the back of the net, blah, blah, blah. But he said, you know, we have to concentrate on giving the opposition zero chances. Yeah. Which I think is, you know, in the overall picture of Mikel Arteta, I think is very aligned with what we know about him and what we understand about how he operates and the way that he wants to build his team, which is first and foremost, I think, to be completely parsimonious in defence, you know, and then use that platform to go on and score lots of goals. And look, Arsenal have scored lots of goals. We are a team that has scored lots of goals. Last season, the most goals we ever scored in a Premier League campaign, right? So the goals are sort of there or thereabouts. But I'm reminded of maybe a discussion we had after the Champions League game against Bayern Munich, and, what do we need? And over the course of the summer, do Arsenal need, another forward, another attacking option, just to give them that little bit of an edge in these big games, like a Champions League quarterfinal against Bayern Munich, right? But I think that need is there not just for those games. It's for these kinds of games as well.
I think you're right. I think that's a really revelatory comment from Arteta. And I think it's not that it's news, but I think it sort of crystallizes a lot of ideas that we kind of have about him, but aren't always able to articulate particularly clearly. I think we all sort of intuitively, because we watched this team and we've watched him develop as a manager, I think intuitively we all know that if you cut Mikel Arteta open, he bleeds clean sheets. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
If you give him 50 million quid and say you can buy one player again,
left back,
it's a left back or a centre half. Yeah. And we all know that about him. And I think he would probably deny it publicly and point to the goals record and with some justification. But I do think that inherently his aspiration is the total elimination of jeopardy. I think I think Arsene Wenger's dream was the invincible season, and I think Mikel Arteta's dream is 38 clean sheets.
You give yourself a great chance of winning the league if you keep 38 clean sheets, to be fair.
Exactly. And I think we all kind of understand that to be true, and I think what he said there kind of illustrates that beautifully. But I agree with you that I think we are missing players, and I think you can make a case that we are 3 attacking players light, which I know sounds like a lot, but I think there's a very good case that we're missing a left side, a left 8, a creative midfield player from that side of the pitch. A wide player who is a genuine alternative to Bukayo Saka and potentially Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard. Someone who provides a true rotation option on that right flank, and a centre forward. And frankly, any one of those 3, I think, might have helped us get over the line yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Do you think, before we go into the break, do you think that a game like this, a performance like this, the sort of, as I said earlier, the mounting body of evidence that these performances are sort of within our wheelhouse might heighten the senses for a January transfer? That, like, at what point does Mikel Arteta stop believing that, if he hasn't already, that Gabriel Jesus is capable of scoring a goal again for this club? Genuinely, there has to come a point where he says, this is not sustainable. This is not good enough. I can't win games. And I think it's not an unreasonable thing for him to consider. I can't win games with Gabriel Jesus and Raheem Sterling in my squad. I have to do something, or the club or whoever has to do something to give me a better chance of winning games. And I'm not excusing him, by the way. These are his players, and in many ways, he's responsible for a lot of the transfer business that we do. But when you have a problem staring you in the face, you can't fucking go full ostrich,
Yeah, I'm actually going to give Mikel Arteta the credit of saying I think he already knows those things. I'm really interested by his comments about Gabriel Jesus last summer. Do you remember, during pre-season, he really came out strong and was like, I see a new Gabriel Jesus.
Yeah.
There's a hunger in his eyes. And I'd love to know if that was true, or was it something he said for one of 2 reasons? Was it something he said because he felt Gabriel Jesus needed to hear it and it might give him a lift? Or did he say it because he was hoping that someone would come in and buy it? I think we can't discount that possibility.
Yeah.
Whichever one of those 3 things it was, obviously it hasn't come to pass, that we've seen that difference in the player. The January question, though, is really interesting because I'm with you on Raheem Sterling, right? That's not working. But why do you end up with Raheem Sterling? You end up with Raheem Sterling because you try and fill that gap in the squad at an inopportune moment. Like in that case, it was 2 days left in the transfer window or whatever it might be. I don't know what I think about that. Like if January means getting another player who's not right, then I'd honestly rather wait, I think. But I know because I know football fans and because I'm not immune to these feelings myself, that's probably not going to be. People aren't going to want to hear that, are they?
No. I get it. I mean, there's the logical aspect of it, which makes perfect sense. If you are going to recruit, make sure you get the players that you want, the right players. I suppose the thing to counterbalance that is, while it is more difficult in January, it is not impossible in January to buy players or find players who can fit your system, who can come in and perform. You know, we've done it before. We have done it before. Like there've been the Denis Suarez's, but there's also been the Martin Odegaard. There was also, Adebayor was a January signing, if I remember correctly.
He was. Diaby as well came in that same window.
Andre Arshavin, I think it was a February signing by the time it went through, but
Monreal, I think.
Yeah, so there are players out there who can do a job, who can do the job for you. I mean, even someone like Trossard was a January signing. January signings. We were pivoting, obviously, from different targets, but they've worked. But I think it's imperative. I think we're too short in the attacking third. I don't just mean height-wise. I think we don't have enough players who can contribute on a consistent basis. And I think,
also,
go on.
I think if it's a short-term commitment, then maybe that's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like if we find a player who adds something, but it's not perfect, but it's a loan or an 18-month contract or whatever it might be, then I think that's acceptable as well. I think in January, it's very, very difficult to find the perfect solution.
Yeah.
History demonstrates that. But there may be something out there. And like I said, there's a guy in that role, sporting director, who's looking to prove something.
Yeah.
That would be a surefire way.
Sure would. Everyone would be on the Jason Tatos if he can do the business in January. All right, look, let's take a little break here. We'll come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at Arseblog and at Gunnerblog in the Blue Sky format. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Just a reminder as well that the Goodly Morning mugs are still on sale. The closer we get to Christmas, the sooner you better order to get them. Everybody wants their presents under the tree. Everybody wants their Goodly Morning mug under the tree on Christmas morning. So you'll find the link in the show notes. And as we've said, all the proceeds will go to charity. And we'll give you an update on that before Christmas in terms of how much we've managed to raise and pledge. So link to the mugs in the show notes. Speaking of mugs, James, that was a very entertaining afternoon at the Twat Trumpet Arena.
It was. I mean, it's always an entertaining fixture, that one, isn't it? I mean, last season it was the crazy game where was it Spurs were down to 9 men and they had the kamikaze high line, and yet Chelsea still couldn't break them down until the 80th minute or something.
Yeah.
This season, Spurs went 2-0 up. Am I right in saying? Both because Marc Cucurella fell over in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, wearing slippers rather than football boots.
Yes, I believe he went on Instagram and posted after the game a picture of his boots in the bin.
I don't blame him.
Before swiftly deleting it, presumably because he had a call from his sponsors saying, maybe don't put your boots in the bin, actually.
Yeah.
But then Chelsea, well, let's not talk about what Chelsea did. Let's talk about Spurs imploding.
That's very funny. Very funny.
Romero injured himself doing a drag back in his own penalty area. And it was kind of downhill from there.
Ended up losing 4-3. I thought I actually nearly cheered the third goal that Tottenham scored because it will just make them even more sad.
Yeah.
Like losing 4-2, you're like, but like 4-3, oh God, we could have almost.
Glorious defeat. The DVD will be out by Christmas, I suspect.
For sure. Link in the show notes.
But before we get to Spurs, just quick thoughts on Chelsea. I mean, obviously they move within 4 points of Liverpool. They move above us in the table.
I think they're good. Unfortunately, they're good. And I don't like it. I much preferred it when they were a laughingstock, and I wish it would go back that way. But I think they are good. Obviously, having a more squad rather than 58 players, sharing.
Still billions of pounds worth of talent, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Squad. I think they'll be. I don't think they'll win the Premier League, but I think they're certainly a player. I think they'll certainly be top four. Given the age of their team and their manager, you'd think they'll be a contender for a few years to come.
Sure.
I essentially think as well, if you want to really do things in the Premier League, if you've got a truly exceptional individual, then you've got a chance. And unfortunately, in Cole Palmer, I think they have one.
Yeah. He is
He's
very
good at penalties. Tell you that
he gets a lot of penalties. Chelsea get a lot of penalties as well, don't they? I mean, they were helped yesterday.
Why? Ruben Amorim needs to pipe up about that. They're playing for penalties.
Yeah. I mean, they get a lot more than we do anyway. But maybe that's in part because of the kinds of players that they have and the way that if you run at players in the box, chances are you're going to tempt a few of them into challenges. I mean, the Tottenham ones yesterday were just so dumb, but
they were incredibly dumb. I mean, was it Sarr who sort of just runs into Palmer's back? I mean, Palmer's basically screaming, "Foul me, foul me, foul me," and he does.
Yeah.
So, what about your mate and mine,
Big Ange?
Big Ange.
Is there some hashtag action today, James?
Yeah, Nuno Tavares said, "Mediocre morning, lads. Please make it goodlier by reading some hashtag Ange out."
Okay.
I've been over to the bad place to see what the angriest fans are saying. Let's have a little scan through. There's some good stuff in here. John Britton says, "If Ange stays at Spurs official, we'll end up in the relegation conversation. It was a risk to start QT and V Van de Ven, I guess that is. When we got the second, the time is to tighten up and protect their legs. Now we have no points and no defenders. Utter incompetence." Hashtag Ange out. Walzins, "Any Spurs fan that says we've progressed under Ange needs to give their head a wobble. We are fucking dreadful 85% of the time. We've gone backwards, but people twerking as we turn in one good performance every 4 or 5 games. He has got to go. Hashtag Ange out. Hashtag Coys."
I love that.
I like that. That's like in the same tweet that you're saying Ange out. We are fucking dreadful 85% of the time.
Come on, you Spurs.
Hashtag Coys. Like, this is so integral to the Spurs identity, this kind of despair. Danny Jacklin, "Again, please. We're a laughing stock. Ange doesn't help and does nothing to change the flow of the game. Nothing. Just stands there. Get him out of my club. Get me someone who can get these players to run through a wall for the badge."
That's what Tottenham need. They need players who can run through walls. Yeah.
You've got to run through the wall for a badge.
For the badge. Forget about being good at football or anything like that. Once you can run through the wall for a badge.
I mean, there's more, but my favourite one is this. Mark McKilligrand, who just says, "Fat Ange, as usual. Clueless idiot who has no idea about defence. Hashtag Ange out." And then he's got a gif of a pig in a thong walking away from camera, and he's just written, "Get rid of this pork."
Oh my goodness. It is, as much as we hate to see Chelsea win, it's always just so funny for them to do what they do.
Get rid of this pork. Crazy. I mean, he can't be long for the job, I don't think, Ange. He seems to be in the death spiral, doesn't he?
Yeah, the incident after the game against Bournemouth was really, really something as well. I played this actually on the 30.
Oh, I missed that. So what? Because I watched the game, but then I turned off. So what happened?
Okay, so basically, TV camera shows you Ange going over to the fans and having a bit of a ding-dong. He said he got some direct feedback, I think, is what he said. But let me see if I've got it here. There was a video filmed from the stands.
This is the trouble these days.
And it had all the music in the background and stuff, but, magic of audio technology, I was able to remove all the music so you can just hear what the fan, either the guy with the camera or the phone or whoever's around him, this is what was going on. I mean,
direct feedback, Andrew.
That is certainly some direct feedback, isn't it?
They were taking him to task on his tactics.
Yes.
A deep conversation about, Ange Ball. What I find most fascinating about this whole thing is that I have actually genuinely spoken to a few Spurs fans, through sort of protective screens and stuff. Sure. I don't want to be too close to them, about like where this all stems back to and where it all went wrong. And genuinely, his relationship with the Tottenham fans began to fall apart around that Man City game last season when he tried to win a football match.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that rift, I think, has kind of led him to where he is now. I genuinely think something in him kind of died that day when he was like, oh, they'd actually want me to win.
Yeah, he did say as much.
Yeah.
He said as much afterwards. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but I remember him saying, like, I've learned quite a bit, about the club or the fans based on what happened, and their desire for their own team to lose because, it would have been good for us if they'd lost. So they'd rather lose than see Arsenal win the league, which, is... Don't need to have that discussion, but I think from his point of view, his professional point of view is just like, I'm going to try and win every game because that's what you do as a football manager. You don't think of the consequences, for other clubs or other teams. You only want to win for yourself. And I think you're right. Since then there has been a big rift, and I don't know that it's mendable at this point, No.
I mean, to be fair, he's also done other mad stuff like refused to practice defending corners and, put any emphasis on that at all. In many ways, they're sort of setting them. Maybe he was like, okay, so you don't want to be like Arsenal. Okay. Well, then we'll never practice set pieces. We'll be the worst set piece team in history. But I think, what are their games coming up? Let's have a look. Because we might get a Spurs manager sacking for Christmas this year. I don't know if that was on your Christmas wish list. They've got Rangers away on Thursday, which is a big game for him as a former Celtic manager. Southampton away on Sunday. I think losing that would be a sackable offence.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
Then they've got Spurs. They are Spurs. Then they've got United in the EFL quarterfinal, which is a big game because Ange has promised everyone he's going to win a trophy this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then they host Liverpool and then go to Nottingham Forest in the Premier League.
Interesting run of games. That
tricky. I think that is a tricky run there. Let's see.
All right, let's move on with some questions. We talked about this, or you mentioned something about this in the first half. Okay. John Foster on the Discord said, "Morning, chaps. Do you think we need to update or rethink the offside rule? It's there to stop goal hanging, but it's morphed into something else entirely. I always liked the idea of the daylight rule, and recently I read it's being considered again. What are your thoughts about it all?"
I quite like the daylight rule just because it so obviously gives an advantage to an attacker. What I would say is you'll still have the line drawing. Do you know what I mean? Like the ascertaining whether or not there's daylight from a camera angle that isn't a perfect horizontal is going to be as torturous and difficult as the current rule. Like at the end of the day, all you're doing there is moving the line. But I like that is heavily in the attacker's favour, personally.
I agree. I think there should be, like, the rule is what it is now. Martinelli was offside yesterday. It's a toe. It's whatever it is. You know, is that within the spirit of the law? I think until such time as there is any change, we obviously have to play within those rules or adapt ourselves to those rules. But I think the daylight rule, I just don't think there's any possible way of changing the rule where we don't just get a different kind of controversy, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. But I think the daylight rule would see more goals allowed, essentially. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I certainly think it's worth experimenting with it. Obviously, we're going to have automated offside technology as well.
Are we? I mean, weren't we supposed to have that in October?
In theory. Yeah. And that would speed the whole thing up. So maybe maybe it's not fair of me to say it's still as arbitrary cool. But I still think you'll have people arguing about daylight. You'll have people saying like, is light getting through there? Like, you'll get fans bringing torches in, trying to prove a point.
Yeah, everybody's got to get the prism app on my phone, just to see if light can pass through this.
But yeah, I think more advantage should be given to the attacker. It's tricky though, right? Like, I used the phrase "spirit of the law," but I feel like that when you're at a point where you've got video technology and things are literally down to millimeters, spirit of the law is kind of out the window by that point in time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there has to be, ultimately, there has to be a line. It's just where that line is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think give it a go. I mean, people thought it was quite mad when Arsene suggested it. I seem to remember him being sort of a bit ridiculed for it. But I'm trying to think if it would make any discern as a centre back, as like a defender. Would it affect how you played the game particularly? It'd probably make you a bit less inclined to play offside. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we want to see goals, and we want to see goals stand.
Yeah, we don't want to keep having the conversation about how it's ludicrous that a brilliant goal is chalked off because somebody's toe was like millimeters ahead of somebody else's toe.
Yeah.
That's not really... I don't think that's good for the game. But there's no way that whatever happens, we won't all be having discussions and debates and controversies about offside. I think it's just part and parcel of the game.
Right. What about this from... I feel like we've talked about this a lot, but I think it is worth talking about. Matt B273. Do we get enough from Rice as an 8? Feels like he only offers anything offensively from free kicks and corners, and is so awkward in tight spaces around the box. I can't picture him ever splitting a defence open. Can you see Arteta ever going with 2 attacking 8s to help the left-hand side?
I'd like to see it. I really would. I think, and I've said this before, I'm sure I've said this to you, that I think Rice is a 6. His best position is a 6. I think he's just such a good all-rounder that he can do a decent job playing left 8. But I don't think that's where we should be playing him on a regular basis. I think if we really want to have a bit more variety in the way that we play and the way that we attack, I would rather see Rice sitting as the 6 with Odegaard on one side and somebody else in the 8, somebody else who can not necessarily do exactly what Odegaard does, but somebody who is more inherently an attacking player. Could be Ethan Nwaneri in the longer term. Could be somebody else.
Could it be? I mean, could it be Mikel Merino? Like, would you rather see that than what we're seeing currently?
I really want to see the Rice, Merino, Odegaard midfield. I'd be happy to see that for a while and see, to what extent Merino could bring something, because I think he is good at arriving in the box late. He's good from set pieces. He's obviously a tall guy. He gives you a bit more attacking threat if you can get him into the box. I don't think he's naturally an attacking player.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if it might be a bit more balanced than what we've been seeing this season. I think Rice as the 6 just seems obvious to me. And then after that, the question is, how do you fill the 8? Is it Merino? Is it Nwaneri? Is it a signing? Is it someone else? But I think that might be the next development in this team to give it a slightly different dimension.
Gabriel Jesus, left 8.
Yeah.
I think this is a conversation that brings us back to kind of squad composition.
Sure.
Because what we've got, effectively, we've got Partey, Jorginho, and Rice in the squad, which is kind of, it feels like quite heavily weighted towards the number 6 position. And I would contend probably not quite enough in the number 8 position. I'm interested by Rice continuing to be in that left 8 slot. I really thought this season we'd see him settle into that number 6. And I know there've been injury issues, and I know the midfield setup's not been quite as Arteta planned. But yeah, I am beginning to wonder. Like, he said years ago he prefers to play number 6. I wonder if that's still true. I don't know. And maybe it doesn't matter what he thinks, frankly.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious to see what happens there. Because unequivocally, our left side is not as strong as our right. And I think that position, maybe more than any other, holds the key to unlocking that.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see Rice, Merino, Odegaard given a few games. I think it would need a few games, probably.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I was a little bit surprised yesterday that he didn't take that option. Perhaps there is a physical issue with Merino that we're not 100% aware of, because he did miss a game last week. Was it last week or the week before? Anyway, it was the Nottingham Forest game, was it?
Forest, I think.
That he wasn't available for. So there might be something physical which is preventing Arteta from picking that trio from the start.
West Ham, actually.
West Ham, right, yeah. But it sort of occurred to me that, in the summer when we were after Merino and when Arteta was so keen to bring him in, that the plan must have been to think about that midfield trio of Rice, Merino, Odegaard.
Yeah.
Have they started a game together yet? I don't know.
Maybe one. I'm actually not sure. Certainly not frequently, because Odegaard's not been there.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the future. Is Declan Rice in that deeper role? It's an interesting one. It is an interesting one. Like, I don't think, if I think back to Xhaka playing that position, I feel like our left flank had a greater sense of fluidity in that period, even though he was not always on the ball. I feel like his movement and his runs in behind and stuff gave us a bit more variety and a bit more options on that side of the pitch.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't help that we don't have a consistent left back either. I do think that is part of the issue on the left hand side.
I mean,
and I have a question if you want to answer.
I'll go on then. You've got a question. Go on.
Yeah, Gibbsino on the Discord. He says, gloomy, stormy morning, gents. If you were the new Arsenal sporting director, how would you try to solve the left-back problem in the January window? A new signing, a sale and a signing, push up Lewis Skelly, wait and watch? I mean, we did make a new signing in the left-back position in the summer, and quite an expensive one at that, so I don't think there's a signing. But that position is problematic, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Suburban Gooner Chris said, morning, gents, Calafiori, third injury since he's joined us, and we know all about his past. I think it might be his fourth, to be honest with you. Do you guys have any concerns, given we're carrying a few injury-prone players in the squad these days?
Yeah.
Are you worried about Calafiori's fitness?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. It might just be teething troubles. He might just not be fully recovered from one thing, and it's kicking into another thing.
Andrew.
No, I don't think so. Definitely not his hair either. But I just mean sort of the early stages of adapting to the Premier League and the physical demands of the Premier League, which I do think are different from Serie A, no question. But it's hard not to be a little bit worried because he's injured. Tomiyasu's always injured. Another great player, but not anyone you can rely on, unfortunately. Zinchenko just, again, plays a few minutes. He's gone again. And after that, you're looking at Kivior, who can do a job at left back, but isn't ideal. I think, if I'm Mikel Arteta, I'm really working hard on Miles Lewis Skelly as a serious option there, because stylistically, I think he sort of fits with what we want to do and how we want to do it, and the way that he can play, having played a lot of his youth career at in central areas, right, before being moved back there. I think as a kind of a fail-safe, that would be something I would be quite strong on. I know Kieran Tierney's back in the squad, but I kind of think he might go in January as well. So, yeah. Yeah,
there's been so much focus on that position, and yet it feels like there could be more to come. I just hope Calafiori can get fit and stay fit. I am starting to be slightly worried. I mean, before we signed him, plenty of people said to me, he's a risk. And that the task of playing in the Premier League, as you've suggested, especially with the kind of regularity Arsenal, do play across 4 competitions, is very different to Serie A, and even playing fullback is a different demand to playing
centre half.
Yeah. So I am a little bit perturbed by his sort of fairly frequent absences. I think Zinchenko could have gone this summer if there was a buyer. I think he'll go next summer, presumably. I think Kieran Tierney will go. I think Tomiyasu might go if someone's prepared to take that gamble on him. And then the next in line would be Lewis Skelly. And like you, I'd like to see him given a chance, given an opportunity. I think if you were compiling a list of attributes you'd want from a young left back in this squad, he ticks most of the boxes.
He does, yeah.
So the idea of him and Calafiori as our options kind of moving forward into the future, I think is good if they're fit and available.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. What?
Seb on Blue Sky said, what drink do you have prepared for when we sign a left back in January instead of an attacker?
A big fucking goblet of poison.
What do you think about starting Tierney, Marina?
I like this one on the Discord from Namargan, who says, goodly morning. Given the huge success we've had with our set pieces under Nicholas Jover, do you think it's time we hired an open play coach?
Very good. Mr. Beer said it can't be coincidence that my new goodly morning mug was put through the dishwasher again ahead of yesterday's game. Very upset with his wife, Amy, over that. What about this from Skelidate, who says, morning, lads. I think it's going to be impossible to go on those runs City have done in previous years. due to the sheer quality now of every opposition, barring Southampton, in the league. In terms of the tactics and personnel in the league, it's gone to a whole other level recently. Do you think the points total will revert back to a norm of about 70, 80 points? I presume this means to win the title, as the teams lower down in the table continue to invest so massively in their squad.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think Southampton are terrible. And a lot of the teams are terrible. Like West Ham are terrible. Wolves this season, good players, but terrible, you know?
Ipswich not.
I mean, I get I get the idea, you know, that football as an industry, and certainly in the Premier League, as these developments, and it's become more sophisticated. You have these analysts, you know, covering every aspect of the club, but ultimately it comes down to, you know, the players that you have available to you, you know, and I don't think there's any way that the 70 odd points is going to win the Premier League ever again. Because, you know, what there is at the top end of the table is a real collection of talent that allows, you know, teams like Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, now Chelsea, you know, to win game after game after game after game. And, you know, I don't think it's anything to do with the level of the Premier League if we don't go on and win a load of games. Like winning 16 out of 18 last season, second half of last season, was brilliant. You know, it is fairly unprecedented for Arsenal as well to go on a run like that. So maybe replicating it isn't realistic, but I think it's more to do with what we do than the level of the opposition. For me, anyway.
I think there may be something to it. It's a funny old league table at the moment, because I agree with you. Like the bottom 7 teams are pretty poor. So that's from West Ham down through Everton, Leicester, Palace, Ipswich, Wolves to Southampton. Mm-hmm. Those are not particularly good sides. But then you look at the rest of the table. I mean, currently United, Newcastle and Spurs are all outside of the top 10. Mm-hmm. And I think that does suggest that maybe that little group, I mean, obviously, you know, they've got their own issues, those teams, but that little group kind of outside of the top 4, the kind of upper mid-table of the Premier League, I think has got stronger. So like
Brentford,
Forest, Brentford, Brighton, Bournemouth, Fulham. I think that group have got better and are in a better position to take points off the so-called big clubs.
Yeah, that's
so I think
fair.
Actually the table, I think there is sort of quite clear groupings in the league this year. You've got kind of the front runners, which I suppose you include City in, along with Arsenal, Chelsea and Liverpool. Then you've got this kind of group of quite aspirational clubs. I mean, I would put Villa just about in that rather than the first group. And then, you know, your Brightons, Bournemouths, Fulhams. And then you've got these kind of slightly faded giants in Spurs, Newcastle and United, who are all kind of underperforming from what you would expect. Do I think that we're at a point where a points tally in the 70s is going to win you the league? No, I don't. And when you look at Liverpool's record this season, I think it's quite hard to believe that will be enough. Yeah.
What about this one, just to finish us off? Because there were a load of questions about Martinelli, and I don't want to talk about that again because I talked about it a bit on Friday in the Arsecast. And, you know, I think, as I said in the first half, the sort of flipping between Trossard and Martinelli isn't so much Arteta rotating in as much as it's two players who can't produce consistently. Therefore, he keeps switching. So there might be an element of rotation, but I think it's more about one guy not being as good or good enough to nail down that position fully. But Scott Drayton on Blue Sky says, what did you think of Martinelli's petulance when he came on? Yellow for throwing the ball away, could easily have got a second for throwing another at a Fulham player. It feels like he's not got the maturity Saka has. And I thought that was quite interesting. He looked a bit, I don't know, a bit crotchety yesterday, Martinelli.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could just say that he was fired up, you know, and I don't necessarily mind that. On the subject of petulance and dissent, I did think Fulham got away with quite a lot. I'm not going to say this after every game because it will get absolutely dull as dishwater, right? But there were clear instances in that game of Fulham delaying restarts and not being punished.
There was 2 in a row in about like a minute in the first half, and it's like I just had to do some breathing exercises because of the referee that was involved.
Well, I think the problem is if we talk about it today, we'll talk about it every week because clearly whatever that directive was, we're at the point in the season where it's worn off and it's no longer being applied.
That's it. It's the sort of the late summer edict that lasts for 3 or 4 games and then is never seen again.
And only seems to impact us.
Yeah.
And so I promise I'm not going to talk about all that.
The Arsenal rule, I think we should call it every season.
Yes, it was pretty infuriating. I didn't have an issue with that from Martinelli. I think that he came on, in my mind, looking very geared up and motivated and trying to perform. I didn't see it as kind of surliness or grumpiness necessarily. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought maybe he was just a bit fired up. The one where he threw the ball down after the ball clearly went out off his own foot, I just thought was a bit silly. You know, I think you can be fired up in more productive ways, though. You know, you can be ready to torment your fullback. I think there is a conversation. There's a lot of discussion happening about Martinelli and whether or not he's sort of plateaued or stagnated or whatever it might be. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable discussion to be had. And I'm a little bit worried now that, without wanting to use that phrase again, the body of evidence is mounting that maybe that is the case. At the same time, I look at the profile and he's only 23 and there is room for improvement, but I do understand why that discussion is happening. But so there you go. There you go.
Well, what next? Monaco on Wednesday.
Monaco on Wednesday. Then we play, is it Everton on Saturday?
Yes, that's right.
Everton on Saturday. They've had a nice break, haven't they, Everton, now? Because it'll be almost... Oh no, they played in midweek, so they've had them. It'll be 10 days, a nice break for them. In the meantime, we'll have played twice, so
they'll be fresh. That's for sure.
They'll be fresh, but they have been pretty terrible this season. So it would be hugely disappointing not to beat Everton. Anyway, look, we will look ahead to the Monaco game a bit tomorrow. We'll have a preview podcast for you over on Patreon. We'll also have an episode of The 30 tomorrow morning over on Patreon as well. We're waiting for tonight's crap fest between West Ham and Wolves to see how that goes.
El
Crapico, yeah. All right. Well, look, we'll have all that for you during the week, and we'll talk about the Monaco game on Thursday in an Arsecast as well. For now, though, take it easy, folks. Thanks so much for being here as always, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.